Probability. Introduction. Probability is the chance that something will happen, how likely it is that some event will happen. Sometimes you can measure a probability with a number. 10% chance of rain, or you can use words such as impossible, unlikely, possible, even chance, likely, and certain. Galileo, an Italian mathematician, was the first person to attempt at a quantitative measure of probability while dealing with some problems related to the theory of dice in gambling. Various approaches to probability. There are three approaches to theory probability, and these are 1. Experimental or empirical, or observed frequency approach. 2. Classical approach. 3. Axiomatic approach. In this chapter, we will study about experimental or observed frequency approach only. Now let's discuss this approach. Experimental or empirical approach to probability. The word experiment means an operation which can produce some well-defined outcomes. In this approach, there are two types of experiments. First one is deterministic, and the other one is random or probabilistic. Let's first learn deterministic experiments. Deterministic experiments are those experiments which, when repeated under identical conditions, produce the same result or outcome. For example, if we mark head H on both sides of a coin and it is tossed, then we always get the same outcome, assuming that it does not stand vertically. Random or probabilistic approach. If an experiment, when repeated under identical conditions, then do not produce the same outcome every time, but the outcome in a trial is one of the several possible outcomes, then it is known as a random or probabilistic experiment. For example, in the tossing of a coin, one is not sure if a head H or tail T will be obtained, so it is a random experiment. Similarly, rolling an unbiased die is an example of a random experiment. Terms related to probability. Trial. When we perform an experiment, it is called a trial of the experiment. For example, if a coin is tossed 10 times, then each toss is called a trial. If the die is thrown 5 times, then each throw is called a trial. If the experiment of tossing 2 coins simultaneously is repeated 25 times, then each simultaneous toss of 2 coins is called a trial. Clearly, if an experiment is repeated n times, then we say that n trials of the experiment have taken place. Elementary event. An outcome of a trial is an elementary event. In tossing of a coin, the possible outcomes are head H and tail T. Therefore, if we define E1 is equal to getting head H on the upper face of the coin and E2 is equal to getting tail T on the upper face of the coin, then E1 and E2 are elementary events associated to the experiment of tossing of a coin. Let there be a cubical die marked with numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 on its 6 faces. Consider now the random experiment of throwing a cubical die. If the die is rolled, then any one of the 6 faces may come upward. So there are 6 possible outcomes of trial, namely 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Thus, if we define E1 is equal to getting face marked with number 1, E2 getting face marked with number 2, E3 getting face marked with number 3, E4 getting face marked with number 4, E5 getting face marked with number 5, E6 getting face marked with number 6. Then E1, E2, E3, E4, E5, E6 are 6 elementary events associated to this experiment. Compound event. A collection, 2 or more possible outcomes of a trial of a random experiment is called a compound event. In other words, a collection of 2 or more elementary events associated to an experiment is a compound event. In a throw of a cubical die, the event of getting an event number is a compound event, as it is the collection of 3 elementary events or outcomes, namely 2, 4, 6. Similarly, getting an odd number is also a compound event. Occurrence of an event. An event associated to a random experiment is said to occur or happen in a trial if any one of the elementary events or outcomes satisfying its conditions is an outcome. Consider the random experiment of throwing a die. Let A denote the event getting an even number. This event consists of 3 elementary events or outcomes, that is, 2, 4, and 6. Now, suppose that the outcome of a trial is 4, then we say that the event A has happened or occurred. In other trial, let the outcome be 3, then we say that the event A has not happened or occurred. Empirical probability. Let there be n trials of an experiment and A be an event associated to it such that A happiness in m trials. Then the empirical probability of happening of event A is denoted by P of A and is given by P of A equals to m by n. That is, P of A equals to number of trials in which the event happens divided by total number of trials. So from this it is clear that the happening event is greater than or equal to 0, and also it is lesser than or equal to the total number of trials. So we can write above expression like this. Or we can say the probability of an event is greater than or equal to 0, and also it is lesser than or equal to 1. Thus, the probability of happening of an event always lies between 0 and 1. If probability of an event A equals to 1, then A is called a certain event and A is known as an impossible event. If probability of A equals to 0,